And he does. Bucknell have defeated BU, and the Bison are through to the Patriot League semifinals. They celebrate on Nickerson Field.
And welcome in. I am Dave Souza alongside with my co-host Alex Greenberg. You just heard there Zach Rockmore scoring for Bucknell, the final PK winner last night. The Bison defeating the Terriers 4-1 in PKs after tying 1-1 heading into overtime in the Patriot League Quarter Final. Alex, that was a heck of a game. You know, it was a really close one. We've seen Bucknell and BU. It always seems to come down between these two teams. In 2013, Terriers needing a real big win in their last game of the season to try to get into the playoffs. Bucknell beat them then. 2014, Patriot League Championship game at Nickerson Field. Terriers the 1 seed. They're playing Bucknell. The Bison beat them then. And then we got the Patriot League quarterfinals in 2016. BU looking to punch their ticket to the semifinals after really coming alive in the second half of the season. And once again, the Bison beat them then. This time it takes penalty kicks instead of the usual overtime.
Yeah, it was definitely an intense game, and it was definitely a game where both teams could have won. Bucknell obviously ultimately did win, but I think, it definitely hurts when you're a BU fan because, now they've lost to Bucknell, as you say, 3 times they've ended their season, and the women's team lost to Bucknell in the championship game the other day as well. So it really just it hurts because, this is turning into a rivalry, and at the moment Bucknell have the upper hand.
Yeah, and we spoke with Coach Neil Roberts after the game, and he understood that, this one, while the Terriers played great, it really was a heartbreaker for his team.
It's disappointing, but give Bucknell credit. They defend well. They fought hard. Again, we gave up the early goal and had a fight and spent a lot of energy to get the equalizer. I give my guys credit. They fought hard the whole time. They kept trying to win the game. The overtime. They kept trying to get goals and. So the goals just didn't fall. I thought we played much better the last half of the season, but we just couldn't get the goals.
And Coach Neil Roberts hitting the nail right on the head. Bucknell really employing a very tough type of defense. Alex, you've been the play-by-play broadcaster for the Patriot League Network for BU this entire season. You've seen them from their opening night game against UMass Amherst, now to their last game against Bucknell. What did you see out there that Bucknell was able to do to beat BU?
They defended really well, as you said. They've got Zach Rockmore, who was their only member of the All-Patriot League first team this season. A really big center back. I think he's 6'3" or maybe even 6'4", and he's just at the back the whole game, shutting down a lot of what BU was trying to do. But Bucknell going up early, that helped them defend almost, because they really, after that, they had a few chances in the first half to make it 2-0, but after that it was all BU. So Bucknell basically was parking the bus and putting a lot of players back on defense and just clogging up space. And, even if it wasn't the best defensive performance we've ever seen, BU did eventually get the equalizer, but it came late. And based on the amount of chances they had in regulation and the amount of possession BU had, they'll be disappointed that they didn't win it 2-1 in regulation. But again, that coming back from a goal when you already don't score a ton of goals, BU in the Patriot League this season, it's tough.
Yeah, and like you said, Bucknell really jumping out to that early lead. BU's kind of been victimized in the earlier part of their season where they go down early and then teams kind of really pack it in. They stack the box in there, forcing BU to the outside. Was that the case today, or yesterday, I should say, or how was Bucknell able to defend?
Yeah, it was definitely the case. Bucknell had a game plan to come out and try and play the same game as BU, but once they took the lead, they were always going to pack it in a little bit and be more conservative. And as you said, that victimized the Terriers a few times this season. There was a game at Lehigh where they completely dominated possession and lost 1-0 and dominated the chances, but just gave up that first goal, and then Lehigh defended well, just like Bucknell did, by putting a lot of people behind the ball. But then also, this was kind of a problem that you could have seen coming. The Terriers had kept a clean sheet in the last 3 games of the regular season, which is great. But they were winning games by 1-0. And I talked to Coach Roberts after the games, and he was saying, we really have to come out and convert our chances, though. And, you saw last night what happens when They come out and they don't convert their chances. There were so many shots yesterday that weren't on target. It was really frustrating because Bucknell had a lot of people behind the ball and in the box when BU was on the edge of the box. So the Terriers had to settle sometimes for shots from the top of the box and shots from outside the area. And they have the players who can hit those shots and who can put them on frame, but rarely did they go on frame.
You know, Bucknell jumping out to the early lead. They scored a goal in the 28th minute off of Quinn Braden. You know, the ball kind of really just ping-ponging around after a corner kick, and Braden able to get kind of the last touch on it with his head just before taking the early 1-0 lead.
As a defender, as a defense, the ball bouncing around like that so dangerously in the box is just a sign of it's something that can't happen. Curler. Gilbert stayed on his line. Ball not done, and now it's in the back of the net. Bucknell have opened the scoring in the Patriot League Championship game. And it's Nick King who gets the goal.
Yeah, really
not the
scrappy one for the Bison.
Not sure why I said that. No, it was Quinn Braden. I said
Quinn
it was
Braden.
Nick King at first.
Oh, yeah, well.
A lot of confusion.
No worries there. You know, it was really tough to see, just especially because of the way that ball was kind of just moving around in there. You saw there were about 5 or 6 Terriers, about 6 or 7 Bucknell players.
And it deflected off a BU player last. So it counted for Quinn because he got his last header on target, but it even still came off a BU player to go in the net. So not an own goal, but yeah, it was a jumbles kind of in the box, and I think it's unlike BU because they really didn't concede a lot of goals off of set pieces and off of corner kicks this season, and that's exactly what they did. They have the personnel in there that is tall and can clear the ball away from a cross into the box, like David Asbjornson, Ben Valek, David Amirani. Those type of guys should be able to clear the ball. But honestly, I think the fault on that goal comes down to Matt Gilbert. I think he should have come off his line at the very start to catch the original corner. And then when he didn't, it was bouncing around in the box. The chances of a goal were pretty likely.
Well, kind of just to push back a little bit there, you know, Gilbert, he is the 6'4" goalie. He's the tallest guy in the field except for maybe David Amirani, who I believe is listed at 6'5". Yep. And while he didn't go out to get it, he sat back, was standing on his line, was kind of not really the type of play that Gilbert does. He's usually very proactive, coming out, challenging other teams, kind of sitting there. And, you know, when you have a guy who had almost the game of his life last night, playing out there, making some spectacular saves after Bucknell got their first goal. For him to concede that one, it was kind of frustrating to see, especially when you have a guy that can go out and clear those corners out, but especially when you're standing on your line and the play is so close to you. It's so hard to see where that ball is going to go when you have such a little reaction time, because it feels like the play is happening maybe 3 or 4 feet right in front of you.
Yeah, that's probably one of the toughest decisions that a goalkeeper has to make in terms of judging the flight of the ball, looking where people are in the box, and then ultimately deciding whether to stay on his line and come out. And I would agree with what you said. I think Matt Gilbert definitely has the skill set and has shown throughout the season that he's very confident in claiming balls that come into the box in the air, and unfortunately just wasn't able to there.
And, you know, we spoke to Anthony Viteri after the game. Viteri has been one of, if not the best offensive player for BU this entire season. You know, this BU Bucknell matchup, we mentioned it earlier in the podcast, that it's been kind of the beginning of a solid rivalry between these two teams in the Patriot League. And, you know, you can coach a bunch of different structures and strategies and ways to go about different set pieces, but a lot of times where teams fall victim to is emotions are running so high, because not only is it a big game in the Patriot League quarterfinals, your season's on the line, but you're playing a team that has knocked you out in 2 of the past 3 seasons, and a team that you guys haven't beaten since joining the Patriot League, and a team that you always have close games with. You're always going to overtime with, kind of that rivalry building here.
And I think that might have played a part.
I was really active on the sideline, and we had high hopes, you know, going into halftime, even in the halftime for the overtime. We were looking good, and it's just unfortunate we lost the penalties.
You guys trailed 1-0 going into the second half. What was said in the locker room?
I just feel like we just had to get the guys going. You know, we really told the seniors that this could be your last time. This could be your last game playing, and, you know, it was their last game, but hats off to them because they had a great season. Every one of them have contributed.
And like he said, it was the seniors' last games, but Anthony Viteri's kind of been a quiet leader in that locker room. Talking with Coach Roberts, he said Viteri's very much a lead by example kind of guy, kind of the inverse of Felix DeBona, who's very loud in the locker room, demands a lot from his team. Viteri goes out there, leads by example. But when he's in the locker room, you heard it there during halftime where he tried to get a lot of his senior teammates going, trying to get them to kind of dig deep and reach down to get that final win. You saw it again when they were playing Army just a few short days ago. He and a bunch of his other teammates kind of orchestrated this plan to hang up photos of the seniors when they were playing soccer as young kids to inspire them. It worked. They got the win then. Try to inspire them this time, and unfortunately things just not going their way.
Okay, yeah, I didn't actually know that he hung up those pictures. That's a pretty interesting factoid. I think Anthony's definitely a good leader, and I think Terriers are going to be happy that he sticks around for another season. He was their sole member this year of the All-Patriot League first team, and I think he's one of the best players in the Patriot League, and it's great to hear that he's one of the best leaders in the Patriot League as well. And I mean, he had 8 goals this season. That was tied for Felix DeBona for leading scorer on the team. I think if you asked Viteri, he'd want to say that he would have liked to have contributed a few more assists this season, because last year he had 2 assists, and this year he had 2 assists again. And I think the way he is as a passer, he has the potential to get above that number. And I mean, the Terriers' offense stalled at times, and a lot of that might have been because some teams did learn how to deal with Viteri. He really likes to have space at the top of the box, and space just to create. And basically what we saw from Patriot League play, and these teams saw Viteri last year obviously, is the Patriot League teams, the ones who were able to successfully defend Viteri, didn't give him any space and shut him down and closed him down whenever he had the ball basically on the opponent's side of the field. But I mean, leadership-wise, I think he'll probably be captain next year.
And Coach Roberts seemingly after every game towards the beginning of the season talked about how they wanted to use Viteri a little bit differently this season. They didn't want him just being the offensive juggernaut they had last year. They had Felix DeBona, a really lethal striker. They wanted Viteri to kind of become the general of this team's offense, where everything kind of started and went through him. And like you said, teams that were able to succeed against BU were able to shut him down. And now with DeBona leaving, and they're going to be depending on the likes of Viteri and a Magnus Benedictson and some young guys like Jerry Oz or Matt McDonald, it's going to be the onus is going to be on Viteri to keep that offense going, to be that offensive catalyst that DeBona was, and at the same time kind of command the offense. We also spoke with Bucknell goalie Ryan Ott. He's coming off of an ACL injury, only playing in 4 games before this one. But even though he hasn't played and made a lot of starts in his NCAA career, he and his team, they too knew kind of the significance, the importance, and the high emotions going into a game against BU.
To this one, this was a must-win. We always have a super tight game, often actually going into OT. So to win this way, I mean, feels great. Really feels great.
And like he said, these teams have gone into overtime every single time they've played each other. They've got 6 contests between the two. BU, unfortunately, 0-3-3 in those matchups. But all of the victories that Bucknell have had to get, they've had to eke it out. And I think Ryan Ott, specifically, I mean, the only matchup he's played against BU was this one. And I really think he shined.
Yeah, definitely. He was great. He obviously in the penalty shootout made some saves. But throughout the game, and, you kind of just wondered, this was only his 4th appearance of the season. I know he was their first choice going into the year and had the ACL injury. But, only appearing 4 times in the season and still producing a performance like that is really impressive. And to be honest, BU didn't test him as much as they should have. Like I said, he did make saves. He was good in the penalty shootout. But, a lot of the BU shots, as I said, were off target, and they should have forced saves out of the keeper to test a goalie who is a sophomore and has only played in 4 games this year, skill or not. But at the same time, as I'm on the broadcast and you can see in overtime that it's going to penalty kicks, me and Alex Smith, who I was doing the game with, both kind of agreed that going to penalty kicks, BU has the edge in penalty kicks. They've got Matt Gilbert, who was the goalkeeper of the year in the Patriot League last season. They have the edge, but Ryan Ott was just as good as Matt.
Exactly, like you were just saying, he's got a young, inexperienced goaltender in Ott. It feels like when you're going into those high-pressure situations, maybe as soon as BU got their game-tying goal in the 78th minute, you knew the next goal was going to be the game winner. So you feel like that one would kind of be working the Terriers' advantage, where they've got a really veteran goalie. They've got a veteran defense, anchored by David Asper-Jorgensen and Adam Shikeli, two just really stout, great defenders that have been there before. They've played Bucknell before. They've been around the block and around the world, it seems like, with just the amount of time they've been on that defense and been able to keep teams at bay and push them to the outside and kind of defend crosses through the middle. And you're going up against a goaltender who's only played in 4 games, and he's away, he's not at home, he's under the bright lights in Nickerson Field. The crowd was
big stage.
Yeah, it was a bit. I mean, we laugh, but it was a big.
It
was
definitely for this level.
Exactly, for collegiate soccer in 2 schools where soccer's probably not the main sport that everybody goes out to. The crowd at Nickerson Field was sizable,
and it still means something. There's one of the most pressure-packed situations in any sport is a penalty shootout. So it says something about mental strength that Bucknell was able to come out of that, and that Ryan Ott was able to come out of that as well as they did.
Exactly. The Terriers were finally able to break through in the 78th minute with Anthony Viteri notching one of his most important goals as a Terrier there, really knotting the game up at 1.
He falls. Butsky back. And it's in! It's Anthony Viteri! DeBona set him up, and Viteri finds the equalizer.
Well, look at that.
Now, Anthony Viteri, like we just said, scoring that goal there, that play really all started with, I believe it was David Amirani.
Yep, he won a header.
Yeah, he won a header, took the ball down, passing it over, TJ Butsky getting in the mix, finding it over to Felix DeBona, who just tapped it to Viteri, and he put a laser beam in the bottom corner. We spoke to Viteri after the game. He was talking about how much practice and preparation went into that type of play right there. He and Felix DeBona had been working on it the entire time. Very kind of shades of David Asper-Johnson at the beginning of the year when he scored against UMass. We talked to him after that game, and he said he and Mark Wadid had been doing that the entire time over the summer, kind of getting that preparation. It paid off, and it paid off with Viteri, this time with DeBona.
A ball just got over the top. Felix, and we worked on it in practice a bunch of times where he just lays it off, and I just hit it one time. But I mean, like I said before, just big teams come up in big situations. But it was just unfortunate that we lost on penalties. And hats off to all the seniors and everyone on the team because we gave it 100%. We really did. We laid it out on the line for 110 minutes.
And Anthony Viteri, he's been the team's leading scorer, or has at least been in the mix with Felix DeBona there, so it kind of seems fitting that those 2 players factored in on what looked to be a season-saving marker.
Yeah, definitely. That was kind of the symbol of a lot of the success that BU had this season, was that kind of connection between DeBona and Viteri, and even earlier in the season, Magnus Benediktsson kind of had that connection with them. And, the ball, it was a really nice play by DeBona because he's such a clinical striker, obviously, and a great scorer. But when he was in such a great position, he realized that Anthony Viteri was in an even better position right behind him, and he could set him up there. And, it was just an instantaneous decision, and Viteri hit it so hard that you didn't know it was a goal until it was kind of coming out of the net because it all happened so quickly. And then, obviously, a great celebration from the BU players because that saved their season for the moment. It just hurts, though, because you wish that they had gotten that goal a little bit earlier. They would have gone on to win the game because they dominated the entire second half.
And, Felix DeBona and Anthony Viteri, they've really been working with each other so well this season. They've been in sync with one another, kind of really knowing where the other one's going to be. And I think a lot of that goes back to over the summer where DeBona and Viteri trained with the New England Revolution. They had the opportunity to go over there, train with the professional MLS team here in New England, and it really paid dividends for BU this year where it always seemed like if one was getting covered really hard, the other was able to find open space and kind of create kind of a dual-headed monster for BU, especially with the likes of Magnus Benediktsson, Jerry Oz, or Matt McDonald playing a supplementary offensive role that allowed them to flourish too.
Yeah, they had the good players around them to help them out. But yeah, as you said, they had a great connection between the two of them, and I think both DeBona trained with they both trained with the Revolution over the summer, and Felix has even come out. There was a piece on him in BU Today where he was saying he would really love to get signed by the Revolution, and he came through their academy as a kid, so and he's the top. I think this year he was the top rated prospect for the MLS draft in the Patriot League, as ranked by, I think, Top Drawer Soccer, which is actually a pretty reputable source. So Felix, I think he has a future playing professionally, and the Revolution need good young players. He's not going to come into the Revolution's main team right away. I don't think he's good enough for that yet. But, they are very much aware of him. Obviously, he was training with them over the summer, as was Viteri. I think those are the two players on this BU team. Obviously, DeBona is done now. But I think both of those players could play on after college at whatever level it is professionally.
Exactly, and both guys, not only they're great soccer players, they're very humble people too.
Yeah, especially Felix.
Yeah, I had the opportunity and the pleasure of sitting down with both of them earlier in the month and kind of talking to them about what the future held for each, and both said that they kind of just hoped to get a tryout with the MLS team or get invited to a combine. They didn't really, think they didn't have many illusions of grandeur, as people so like to put it, but they spoke so highly of one another. Anthony Viteri has gone on and he's raved about how Felix DeBona is going to get invited to a combine. He's going to be taken in a draft, or he's going to be signed by one team. He says you guarantee that Felix will be playing professional soccer someday, and Felix doing the same thing, talking about Viteri, how he has such great capabilities on both sides of his feet. He's got the ability to play in the MLS and play over in Europe with some really great teams.
That's the thing. They both have a quality that sets them apart in American soccer, and that they have just kind of this natural skill. The main critique of American soccer development and American soccer players is a lot of the time it's just built on creating good athletes. You get just these physical specimens, but when they actually touch the ball, they don't have the touch that the players in Europe do. And I mean, Felix DeBona was born in Brazil, but I think if he decided to, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but if he ever decided to commit to a national team, he would play for the U.S., I think, and he has that Brazilian skill that really sets him apart, and that's why I think he's such a highly touted prospect. Viteri has the same thing. He's, with the step overs he pulls, he did an elastico at one point in the season. He's got the equivalent of 5-star skill moves from FIFA. He's literally that skillful. So I think that's another thing that would help him compete at the next level. And we've seen, we have a precedent for this. Dominic Badji playing for the Terriers a couple years ago, starting for the Colorado Rapids in the MLS quarterfinals, and he'll probably start for them in the semifinals as well. And I'm not sure that he was that much greater than DeBona and Viteri were at BU. So I think if he can make it to the next level, there's definitely no reason that DeBona can and that Viteri can. So I think I would back Anthony's claim that Felix is going to get drafted this year. I'm not sure if it'll be the MLS draft or the USL draft or whatever. Maybe I think it'll probably be the end of the MLS draft towards the end of it, but I think he'll latch on with the team somewhere. And then next year, obviously, Viteri has another year at BU. After that, I think he could do the same.
And no scoring in the 2 overtime periods. It was golden goal, as it is in NCAA soccer. It was kind of talked about on the broadcast how those 2 overtime periods were actually kind of the most boring of play they had. It was kind of stalemates, no real great opportunities. There was one chance BU had that DeBona tried to back foot, but it unfortunately got cleared out by the Bucknell defense. And then we went to penalty kicks. And, penalty kicks is kind of a highly controversial type of way to end a game in soccer. We've heard throughout the soccer community how a lot of people don't like that PKs go that really decide a lot of fates for teams. But in all honesty, I'm always a fan of penalty kicks. I love watching them. I think they're great.
I don't think there's too much reason to change things just because you can't play forever. And overtime was a little more boring. BU still...
Yeah, it's kind of a war of attrition. You're just trying to wait out the other
teams
side.
Were exhausted. BU still had the better possession and the better chances in overtime, but you could tell they were exhausted out there mentally because, as Coach Roberts said, they had to use up so much energy to tie the game after going behind. They were exhausted in overtime. Bucknell was exhausted in overtime. Terriers didn't really have any chances, but they had balls that were bouncing around the box that they could have finished, like the DeBona chance. And then penalties, it's basically a lottery. I mean, there's some individual performances that can help you, like a Ryan Ott making a save, and then there's the mental things like missing a penalty. It's always expected. The advantage is on the kicker because it's so hard for someone to save it from that close range, but at the same time, it's so stressful to take a penalty. And I mean, these were penalties deciding the Patriot League quarterfinals. I can only imagine how people feel when it's penalty kicks in like the World Cup, you know?
Yeah, I completely agree. And you just said it, sometimes individual performances really make the difference in penalty kicks. Ryan Ott had a spectacular save on Felix DeBona, and it's really interesting to see because usually it's the performances of a lot of the kickers that determine how the outcome is going to be. For goalkeepers, I should say, it's kind of the opposite, where a lot of times it's really just guessing the right side, and there's some skill that comes into it, but at the same time, a lot of it is kind of just luck. So we talked with Odd after the game, and I kind of wanted to pick his brain as to how, as a goalkeeper, you deal with the whole issue of not really knowing what's going to happen in a PK and kind of just having to kind of guess almost.
Keep one at the back of the net, and hopefully my players put all 5 in. Just one. It only took one. So.
And they say penalty kicks are very much a guessing game for the goalkeeper. What was your mentality going through it?
In some ways it is, but as soon as DeBona actually lined up with the short approach, I knew he was going to that side. So that actually worked out in our favor. But props to the guys; they put all theirs away.
So Ryan Ott kind of having the inside track on what Felix DeBona was doing. Alex, you've played soccer, you've watched soccer, you've broadcasted soccer for seemingly your entire life. You've been involved with the sport. How much of, how can you tell what a player is going to do when you're a goalkeeper in PKs?
Yeah, so Matt Gilbert kind of said something similar. I forget what game it was. BU won on a penalty Matt Gilbert saved a penalty to preserve a BU victory in like the first half of a game this season. I want to say it was against Lafayette. And Gilbert told me after the game, he just kind of watched the other player's body language walking up and just which ways he was looking in goal more often than the other. So I think that's definitely part of it. And what Ott said is definitely true, too. Felix did have a short run-up, and, he's a righty. So, it's easier to take a penalty to sort of hit it across than to open yourself up and hit it, because then you open yourself up to
skying the ball or putting it
skying the ball
wherever.
That's what everyone's afraid of, like sitting back and opening yourself up and getting underneath it. And Felix maybe telegraphed himself just a little bit on that penalty. And any good goalkeeper knows what to do in penalty shootouts. Matt Gilbert had a little bit of mental. He tried to kind of get under the Bucknell player's skin a little bit. He went over to the sideline right before it started to delay the start, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
A whole new meaning to icing the kicker.
Yeah, it's like staring down your opponent, trying to get in their head, and whoever's mentally tougher, other than just the execution, is going to come out on top. And unfortunately, in that moment, Felix, it's brutal because he's the most emotional player in the team, and for him to fail in that moment hurts me as a fan, and I'm sure it hurts him even more.
Exactly. And you said Matt Gilbert going into penalties, kind of trying to do a little bit of a fake out there. But earlier in the game, Gilbert was almost otherworldly.
Yeah.
He was making some really fantastic saves in the second half just before BU was able to get their equalizer. Bucknell streaming down on a breakaway. Gilbert coming all the way out of the box to challenge him, was able to make the stop there, and that was just one of 3 spectacular saves he had on the night.
Yeah, there was a kick save at one point where if Bucknell had scored, they would have gone up 2-0. And that was, I think, the best save that I've seen Matt make all season. And he had a performance against Lafayette where he had 9 saves and was the Patriot League goalkeeper of the week that week. And he didn't have to make the same volume of saves in the game last night, but the spectacular saves were just as spectacular, and that kick save was really something of beauty. But then also, as you said, he can, he's 6'4", but he still knows when to come off his line and come out of the box and play a little bit of sweeper keeper. And that, if he hadn't been at his best, if BU had someone different in there, they would have gone down 2-0 and probably not have recovered to even force overtime.
And, when you look at his stats, you would think that he had a worse year than he did, but I really don't think his defense helped him this season, kind of accounting for that inflation in his goals against average and save percentage. But to me, just from the eye test, it looked like he was the exact same goaltender, if not an even better one, than he was last year when he won Goalkeeper of the Year for the Patriot League.
Yeah, and, I think it was more he had a couple rough games that really kind of weighed things.
That one against American.
Yeah, against American, against Loyola, and then against Harvard. Those games maybe weighed in the other direction, but I mean, he still made the All-Patriot League second team. He was still Matt Sanchez from Loyola was the keeper of the year this year, but Gilbert was still right there. And Coach, after the Lafayette game, I think Coach Roberts said, Matt's had a bit of a rough break luck-wise recently, and he maybe has just been down on his luck, and he bounced back from that the second half of the season for sure, and established himself once again as that dominant keeper in the Patriot League, even if it wasn't his best season as a Terrier from start to end.
And he said after this game against Bucknell that Gilbert really kept them in the entire game. His play was very similar and conducive to that of the second half of the season that he had been so strong in. Coach Roberts really kind of harping on the type of goaltender that he had and that was able to keep them within the entire game. You have a different goalie in there. You have someone, maybe if they switch goaltenders and you have a little bit more of an inexperienced one, Bucknell able to get a couple more goals past them, and then we're not even talking about PKs. We're talking about what happened defensively for BU.
Yeah, he played the last half of the season. He played really well, and kept us in the game when we were trying to push guys forward to try to get the goal. So it was, he's a good goalie. We'll miss him for sure.
And Matt Gilbert, kind of a good transition there from Coach Roberts helping us out. He is going to be one of numerous seniors leaving this team, and the question that we have with the season ending for BU is, where are they going to go from here?
I think in the same direction, because I think the same direction is good. There were a lot of young players on this team who are making a positive impact. A lot of underclassmen. I mean, you had a great freshman class last year with T.J. Butsky, Magnus Benediktsson, and that got followed up by probably a just as good freshman class this year with, Jerry Ozo basically becoming one of the Terriers' main starters towards the end of the season and in the second half of the season, and Matt McDonald playing probably a lot more than Coach Roberts expected to be playing him. And I think those are two players who have very bright futures. They're only going to be sophomores next year. I'm sure Coach Roberts and them will bring in another good recruiting class, because I honestly think BU is one of the most attractive destinations in the Patriot League for talent. And I think also the Patriot League is going to the Patriot League was really good this year, and BU was not as good this year as they were, say, last year when they lost in the semifinals to American. But American kind of ran the table this year, and Loyola were surprisingly good. And just looking at those two teams, they're not going to be as good next year because they're losing seniors. And I think the Terriers are in great shape because Coach Roberts is a great coach. Next year will be his 33rd season. I'm assuming he's coming back. But even if he's not, there's coaches in the wings who are going to take this program on when Coach Roberts does eventually leave. But there's freshmen who are going to come in, and it's tough to replace someone like Felix DeBona, but Matt McDonald's going to do his best. It's tough to replace someone like David Asbjornson, and David Riccio is going to do his best. Colin Chiappo, who didn't play a ton this year, is going to do his best. So I think they've got a very bright future.
And, like you said, defensively, I think is where BU is going to find their trouble next season. You're losing two defensive anchors in David Asbjornson on that back line and Matt Gilbert. But offensively, I think BU is still going to keep pace. I mean, I know you're losing Felix DeBona, and he accounts for so much of your team's offense, but we really saw the emergence of Magnus Benediktsson as a great striker and a great forward this season. He may not have appeared on the stat sheet as much, but I believe he was either third or fourth on the team in points, and his ability to kind of rattle off some great runs with his dynamic speed is really going to be dangerous for teams to try to oppose, especially with a lot of them going to be zeroing in on Viteri, who is going to be the guy that everybody is trying to stop for BU.
Yeah, I think Magnus, he had a great start to the season. He had 4 assists after 4 games, but then he didn't pick up another assist the rest of the season. So, there were a couple games where he only played 5 minutes. There was one game where he played 1 minute towards the end of the season. So I think there was something going on there between him and Coach Roberts, and maybe they just had a little bit of a rough patch, or Coach Roberts didn't trust him completely. But going into next season, he's still a great young player who's going to be a junior next year. And even though he's only going to be a junior, I think he's like 23 or 24. Like, he's pretty old for because he comes from Iceland, obviously, and things are different there. So he's going to be great going forward, hopefully, and hopefully he'll play more like he did at the start of this season than he did at the end.
And he's also going to be helped out by Mac McDonald and Jerry Ozor. But before we leave, we're going to quickly take a look at the rest of the Patriot League tournament, as now we're moving on to the semifinal games. I'll let Alex take it away from this one.
Yeah, so the favorite going through is obviously the team that won the regular season and is hosting the tournament, American. That's who Bucknell has to play next. So if BU had won, they were going to have to go and play American in the semifinals for the second year in a row, which
a team that had beaten them 2-0 on a rainy day in Boston.
A very frustrating day in Boston for sure. And I'll be honest, I don't think BU would have been able to beat them, but obviously you want to be in there with a shot. But I mean, we'll see how Bucknell does. And then the other semifinal is Loyola, who are kind of the surprises this season after being the worst team in the league last year, playing against Colgate, who just snuck by against Army.
And that was a really high-scoring game. That was 3-2. Colgate, I believe, pulled away late in that one.
They had a penalty at the end to win it in the last 15 minutes or something.
Exactly. That one was really high-scoring. But that's going to do it for us here. We're at Boston University's College of Communication. For my co-host, Alex Greenberg, I'm Dave Souza. I want to thank our producer, Jake Reiser, and everybody else who's going to be tuning into this great podcast. And we want to thank the BU men's soccer team for providing not only us, but the entire school of Boston University with some great competitive play this season. Thanks for all for joining, and we'll see you next time.